Okay, so then let's go and link these modules together. So how does npm link work? We have to go in the module that we are requiring. So here we are in range slider integer, and we are requiring input integer UI and range slider UI. So this range slider UI is one of the modules that is being required. So inside of this module, we do npm link, and we make this component, this module, linkable locally. And now in the project where we are requiring it, we can say npm link and the name of the module, range slider UI. So once we do this, we technically have them linked. So let's see, if we now run npm start, what would happen? Let's check the console. So what we are saying is that when inside of range slider UI, the input changes. So when there is a change, we are calling a notify function. And this notify function is this function. So it should update the number in the output, and it did. Okay, so we're not logging anything, we're literally outputting the number here. So when the notify function is called, it triggers exactly this function, because this is the function that we are passing here. And when we get the message back, so when this function is called on the other side, this body of the function gets executed. So it checks if there is a type update, and if it is, it takes output inner text and sets it to whatever is inside of the body, and in the body is the current value. That's perfect. Okay, so let's do the same for the other component that we are requiring. So input integer UI. So let's open this component. Code let's see, where do we have this? We are currently inside of range slider in composing web components. The other one was inside of the basic components. So this is at least how I structured it. So code input integer. So we open yet another Visual Studio Code with the code to input integer UI. And here we will again do npm link. And on the other side, we go back to the composing web components and range slider integer. And here we say npm link input integer UI. So then we will have both of these dependencies locally connected with this repository, so we can immediately test the changes. So we have to pass the listen function now also when we are creating the input integer. And input integer in its main function, we will receive this notify. And let's see, when will we hold the notify? So when is our change happening? On key up, on mouse leave, on blur. So we can say each time we do the on key up. Okay, so let's just move this here. Let's make it bigger. So in handle on key up, we will execute this notify function. We will call it and we will pass in the type, which is update, and the body, which is val, and val is coming from here, and this is representing the current value of our input integer field. So when this function is going to be called, it will execute this, it will check if type is update, and if it is, it will update basically the output and set the inner text to be whatever we passed in as a body, which is the val. The only thing now here is that we get this notify function inside of the function input integer, and this function ends here. So the problem is the scope, because this function here doesn't have access to the notify. That's why also here it's a little bit grayish, this notify. It's telling me, oh, it's not used anywhere, although I'm using it here. It's not used because it's not correctly used. So we have to move these two functions, or at least this one, but I will just move both because they're both handlers, inside of input integer function. Handlers. So we should usually not define anything after the return, because it will never get executed. The only thing that gets executed is function definitions. So anything after return statement doesn't get executed, except for function definitions. So we can put them below. And they are now inside of this input integer. So now this one is not gray anymore. So notify can be executed and will be executed. So we can now try out if it works correctly. So here we want to restart our server. Okay, so range slider works from before. Now let's see if this one works too. 5. Yay, it does. Okay, super. So we have the first basic communication. Both of the modules are telling the parent module what is their current value. Now the next thing will be, we now, when we receive the value from one of the components, we have to tell the other component, hey, the range slider is currently set to 6. You have to update 2. So this is the next challenge. Okay, we should now add one additional thing, git ignore file. We didn't create for the range slider integer yet. So let's just quickly do this. .git ignore, and we put in the node modules, and we can now finally also push this to GitHub. So npm run build, git add, git commit, and we will have this initial commit and git push. Okay,